Sometimes the deepest wounds come from the hands we held as children. I'm Patricia Henderson, 74 years old now, and I've spent most of my adult life among books as a librarian. Books have clear beginnings, middles, and ends. Real life, I've learned, is messier. Today, I want to share with you a story that took me 20 years to fully understand. A story about trust, betrayal, and the devastating moment when you discover that the person who destroyed your life was sleeping in the bedroom next to yours, when you were both just little girls with scraped knees and shared secrets. I sit here in this library corner where I worked for 30 years, surrounded by the familiar scent of old paper and binding glue, holding a photograph that's faded to sepia tones. In it, two young women smile at the camera, arms wrapped around each other. I'm the one on the left, 23 years old, wearing a cotton dress my mother made. The other is my sister Linda, 21, her head resting on my shoulder. We look inseparable. We were inseparable. Or so I thought. Linda and I grew up in a modest 3-bedroom house in suburban Pennsylvania in the 1950s and 60s. Our father worked at the steel mill, coming home each evening with his lunch pail and tired eyes, but always a smile for his girls. Our mother was a seamstress who could make magic with a spool of thread and scraps of fabric. We weren't wealthy, but we were rich in the ways that mattered. Or so I believed then, when the world still made sense. Linda was my shadow, following me everywhere with her gap-toothed grin. When I learned to ride a bicycle, she insisted on learning too, even though she was barely 5 and kept falling into Mrs. Chen's rose bushes. When I started school, she cried every morning until she could join me 2 years later. We shared a bedroom, whispered secrets under the covers with a flashlight, made elaborate plans about the future. She wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to work with books. We promised we'd always take care of each other. Life moved forward as it does. I went to community college, got my degree in library science, and started working at the public library in 1972. Linda married young, at 19, to a man named Tom, who sold insurance and had big dreams about making it rich someday. I married later, at 28, to Michael, a kind, quiet accountant who loved crossword puzzles and Sunday morning pancakes. We were happy in our ordinary way. Our parents aged gracefully into their 70s and 80s. Dad retired from the mill with a decent pension. Mom kept sewing almost until the end, her fingers still nimble even when arthritis began to gnarl them. They lived in the same house where Linda and I had grown up, surrounded by 40 years of memories and accumulated possessions. Then came 2003, the year that cracked my world down the middle, though I wouldn't know it for another 20 years. Dad died in March of that year, quickly, of a massive heart attack while tending his tomato plants. Mom followed him 8 months later. The doctor said it was pneumonia, but Linda and I knew better. She died of a broken heart. 56 years of marriage doesn't just end, it tears a hole in the universe. I remember sitting by Mom's hospital bed in those final days. She was so small, shrunken down to almost nothing, but her mind was clear. She called Linda and me to her bedside, gripping our hands with surprising strength. "My girls," she whispered, her voice raspy, "I'm going to be with your father soon. Everything is arranged. The lawyer has all the papers. You'll both be taken care of. Promise me you'll look after each other. Promise me you'll stay close. You're all each other has now. We promised, both of us crying. Linda squeezed my hand and I squeezed back. We buried Mom on a cold November day, standing together under a black umbrella as the rain mixed with our tears. The thing about grief is that it makes you vulnerable. It opens you up and leaves you raw. I was drowning in loss, barely functional. My husband Michael tried to help, but he'd never been good with emotions. His love language was practical support, not comfort. And then, just 2 weeks after Mom's funeral, the library announced budget cuts. I was laid off after 25 years of service. 25 years, and they let me go with 2 weeks severance and a cheap plaque. I was 53 years old, unemployed, grieving, and terrified about the future. That's when Linda stepped in. She called me one evening, her voice warm and concerned. "Patty, I know you're going through so much right now. Why don't you let me handle the estate stuff? All those legal documents and paperwork, it'll just be more stress you don't need. Let me take care of it for you." I was so grateful I almost cried. My baby sister looking out for me. "Are you sure, Linda? It seems like a lot of work." "That's what sisters are for," she said. "Besides, Tom knows some good lawyers. We'll get everything sorted out quickly and fairly. You just focus on finding a new job and taking care of yourself." It took Linda about 6 months to wrap everything up, as she put it. During that time, she'd give me occasional updates. The house was being appraised. There were some complications with the title. Dad had some outstanding debts nobody knew about. The lawyer's fees were higher than expected. I didn't question any of it. Why would I? This was Linda, my sister, my childhood companion, the person who knew me better than anyone except maybe Michael. Finally, in June of 2004, Linda came over to our apartment with a folder of documents and a check. She looked tired, stressed. "God, Patty, this was so much more complicated than I expected. I'm sorry it took so long." "Don't apologize," I said, making us both tea. "I can't thank you enough for handling it." She sat down at my kitchen table and spread out the papers. "Okay, so here's the situation. The house sold for $120,000. Not as much as we hoped, but the market wasn't great, and it needed a lot of repairs. Then there were the legal fees, the realtor's commission, Dad's medical bills that Medicare didn't cover, some credit card debt Mom had been hiding, taxes, probate costs. It all added up. She showed me itemized lists, official-looking documents with stamps and signatures. My eyes glazed over. Numbers had never been my strong suit. That's why I'd married an accountant. "Bottom line," Linda said, sliding a check across the table. "After everything was settled, we each get $20,000. $20,000. I stared at the check. It seemed low, given that our parents had owned their house outright and Dad had that pension. But what did I know about estates and inheritances? Linda had done all the work. She dealt with lawyers and realtors and paperwork while I was barely managing to get out of bed each morning. "Thank you," I said, hugging her. "Thank you for doing all of this." "We're sisters," she said, hugging me back. "Always." That $20,000 was a lifeline. It got me through the next 8 months while I searched for work. I finally found a part-time position at a small community library across town. Not the same prestige or pay as my old job, but it was something. Michael's salary covered most of our expenses, but just barely. We couldn't afford to retire when we'd planned. We couldn't afford much of anything. Meanwhile, Linda seemed to be doing well, really well. In 2006, she and Tom bought a beautiful 4-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood. Tom's business is really taking off, she explained when I commented on it. She started going on cruises, Alaska, the Caribbean, Europe. She wore designer clothes, had her hair done at expensive salons, drove a new car every few years. I was happy for her. Truly. If anyone deserved good fortune, it was Linda. She'd always been the more social one, the more ambitious one. She'd worked hard, and now it was paying off. But I noticed something over the years. She started to pull away. Our weekly phone calls became monthly, then sporadic. She was always too busy for lunch. Family gatherings became awkward, with Linda arriving late and leaving early. When we did talk, she seemed guarded, careful. She asked very little about my life and shared even less about hers. "Do you think Linda's mad at me about something?" I asked Michael one night in 2010. He looked up from his crossword puzzle. "Why would she be mad at you?" "I don't know. She just seems distant." "Maybe she's just busy. Her life is different from ours." That was true. Her life was very different from ours. She lived in abundance while we counted pennies. She traveled the world while we took day trips to nearby state parks. She wore silk while I mended my old cardigans. I didn't resent her success. I want to be clear about that. I was genuinely happy that she was thriving. I just missed my sister. I missed the closeness we used to have. The years passed. Michael and I celebrated our 40th wedding anniversary with dinner at a modest Italian restaurant. I turned 70 and finally retired from the library, my pension barely enough to supplement Michael's Social Security. We moved into a smaller, cheaper apartment. We were getting by, just barely, but we were together and relatively healthy. That was enough. Then came July 2023, my nephew's wedding. Linda's son was getting married at a fancy country club, and everyone was there. Cousins I hadn't seen in years, old family friends, the whole extended family. It was the kind of lavish celebration that Michael and I could never have afforded for our own children if we'd had any. I was sitting at a table with some relatives, making small talk, when Tom, Linda's husband, sat down next to me. He'd been at the open bar for a while, his face flushed, his words slightly slurred. "Great party, huh?" he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Beautiful," I agreed. "You and Linda must be so proud." We are. He leaned in conspiratorially. "Cost us a fortune, but hey, we can afford it. Linda's smart with money, always has been. That inheritance from your folks, she invested it perfectly. Real estate, stocks, really built it up over the years." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "The inheritance?" "Yeah, from when your parents passed. What was it, like 45,000 each? She turned that into serious money. Smart woman, your sister." I stared at him. "Tom, we each got 20,000. His smile faltered. "What?" "No, I'm sure it was more than that. I remember when she got the check, she was so excited about—" He stopped, his face going pale. Oh shit. I think I might be remembering wrong. Must be the champagne." He stood up quickly, almost knocking over his chair. "Excuse me, I need to find Linda." But I'd already seen the truth in his eyes, the horror of realization, the desperate backpedaling. I couldn't breathe. The reception continued around me, music and laughter and clinking glasses, but I was drowning. Michael found me in the parking lot, sitting in our car, shaking. "What happened? Are you ill?" I told him what Tom had said. Michael's face went hard in a way I'd rarely seen. "We need to find out the truth." The next Monday, I started digging. It wasn't easy. It was 2023, and my parents had died in 2003. 20 years of distance, of faded memories, of lost paperwork. But I was a librarian. I knew how to research. I knew how to find information. I started with the county records office, searching for the sale of my parents' house. It took several visits and the help of a kind young clerk, but finally we found it. The house had sold in March 2004 for $380,000. Not $120,000. $380,000. I sat in that records office, staring at the number on the computer screen, and felt my entire past reshape itself. 20 years. 20 years of struggling, of penny pinching, of making do with less. 20 years of watching my sister live in luxury while I wondered what I'd done wrong in life. I found the lawyer who had handled my parents' estate. He'd retired but still lived in the area. He was in his 80s now, but his memory was sharp. He invited me to his home and pulled out old files from his garage. "I remember your parents," he said, spreading the documents across his dining room table. "Lovely people. They wanted to make sure both daughters were taken care of equally. The estate had been worth $452,000 total. The house, their savings, Dad's pension payout, Mom's life insurance policy, it had all added up. After legitimate expenses and taxes, there should have been approximately $220,000 for each daughter. Linda had stolen over $200,000 from me, but it was worse than that. Much worse. The lawyer showed me the documents. Linda had fabricated debt records, credit card bills that never existed, medical expenses that were already covered by insurance, inflated probate costs. She'd created an entire false narrative of our parents' financial situation. And then he showed me the release forms, the documents saying I agreed to the settlement and waived any further claims on the estate. The signature looked like mine, but it wasn't mine. "I never signed these," I whispered. The lawyer looked at me with such pity. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Henderson. I met with both you and your sister according to my notes, but I see now that wasn't true. Your sister came alone. I was handling so many estates at the time. I must have just... I'm so very sorry." Linda had forged my signature. She'd pretended to be me in meetings with the lawyer. She'd constructed an elaborate fraud, and she'd done it while I was grieving our parents, while I was terrified about my future, while I was depending on her for support. My baby sister, the girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, the teenager who'd cried on my shoulder over her first heartbreak, the woman who'd promised our dying mother that we'd always look after each other. I don't remember driving home. Michael said I was in shock, just repeating, "I can't believe it," over and over. But once the shock wore off, there was something worse. Rage. Pure burning rage like I'd never felt before in my 72 years of life. I called Linda. She didn't answer. I called again and again. Finally, she picked up, her voice tight. "Patty, this isn't a good time. You stole from me." My voice was shaking. "You stole my inheritance, Mom and Dad's money, over $200,000. Silence, long, stretching silence. Then, "I don't know what you're talking about." "I have the documents, Linda. I've seen the real sale price of the house. I've talked to the lawyer. I know everything." More silence. When she spoke again, her voice was different, cold, hard. "I need to call you back." She didn't call back. Instead, I got a text from Tom. "Linda says you need to stop harassing her or she'll get a restraining order. She doesn't know what lies you've been told, but she handled everything legally. I hired a lawyer. It took most of my savings just to pay the retainer. My attorney, a sharp woman named Maria Santos, reviewed everything and shook her head. "You have a case, absolutely. But I need to be honest with you. This happened 20 years ago. There are statute of limitations issues, and even if we win, collecting will be difficult if she's hidden the assets." "I don't care," I said. "I want the truth on record. I want her to face what she did." "Are you prepared for what this will do to your family?" Maria asked gently. I thought about that question for a long time. Was I prepared to tear apart what remained of our family? To make every gathering, every holiday, every funeral into a battlefield? Then I thought about 20 years of struggle. 20 years of Linda looking me in the eye, hugging me at Christmas, saying, "I love you, sis," while sitting on a fortune she'd stolen from me. 20 years of deliberate, calculated betrayal. "Yes," I said, "I'm prepared." The lawsuit dragged on for 2 years. 2 years of depositions, of document requests, of court dates. Linda denied everything at first, then claimed I'd been fully informed and had agreed to the settlement. Her lawyers argued that the statute of limitations had passed, that I'd waited too long. But the evidence was overwhelming. The forged signatures, the fabricated debts, the lawyer's testimony that he'd never actually met with me. Slowly, Linda's defense crumbled. I'll never forget the day she finally admitted it. We were in a conference room for a settlement discussion. Lawyers on both sides, everyone in suits and serious faces. Linda looked older, harder. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Fine," she said suddenly, cutting off her lawyer mid-sentence. "Fine, I did it. Yes, I took the money." The room went silent. Her lawyer looked like he wanted to strangle her. "Why?" I asked. It was the first word I'd spoken directly to her in 2 years. She finally looked at me, and her eyes were full of something I couldn't quite name. Resentment? Justification? "You were always so helpless, Patty. So naive. Even back then, you were falling apart. You'd just lost your job. You couldn't handle the estate paperwork. You couldn't handle anything. So you decided to rob me? I decided to put the money where it would be used properly." Her voice was rising. "Look at what I built with it. Tom and I created a good life. We invested wisely. We made something of ourselves. What would you have done with it? Stuck it in a savings account earning 1% interest? You would have wasted it. It wasn't yours to decide. You were so trusting, so stupid. The words came out like poison. You signed everything I put in front of you without even reading it. You deserved to lose it. Michael, who'd been sitting quietly beside me, stood up. This meeting is over. The judge eventually ruled in my favor. Linda was ordered to repay the stolen amount plus interest, over $350,000. But by then, Linda and Tom had transferred most of their assets into a complex web of trusts and corporate entities. The beautiful house was in a family LLC. The investment accounts were in Tom's name only. The vacation properties were owned by shell companies. We executed the judgment. We seized what we could. I recovered $83,000 over the next year, a fraction of what I was owed, but more than I dared hope. The family fractured exactly as Maria had warned me it would. Linda's children stopped speaking to me. Some cousins took her side, arguing that I was destroying the family over money, that I should have just let it go. "It's been 20 years," one cousin said at a family reunion I made the mistake of attending. "Why bring it all up now? You're ruining everything." "She ruined it 20 years ago," I replied. "I'm just refusing to pretend anymore." But not everyone abandoned me. Some relatives, especially the older ones who'd known my parents, were horrified by what Linda had done. They reached out with support, with apologies for not seeing it sooner. "Your mother would be heartbroken," my Aunt Joyce said, crying. Michael stood by me through everything. He'd wanted to kill Linda, not literally, but he'd been ready to shout her crimes from the rooftops to make sure everyone knew. I'd had to calm him down. His rage on my behalf was oddly comforting. The money I recovered helped. We paid off some medical bills. We put some away for emergencies. We didn't have to worry quite so much about every penny. But it didn't erase 20 years of unnecessary struggle. It didn't give me back the retirement I should have had. It didn't undo the stress that had aged me. The nights I'd lain awake worrying about money. The dreams I deferred because I couldn't afford them. And it certainly didn't give me back my sister. Linda and I haven't spoken since that conference room admission. We won't, not ever again. At 74, I don't have time for reconciliation with someone who sees my trust as stupidity, my love as weakness. Some people say I should forgive her, that holding on to anger will only hurt me. But this isn't anger anymore, it's clarity. I see now that the sister I loved, the sister I thought I knew, might never have really existed. Or maybe she did exist once, when we were children sharing a bedroom and dreams, and somewhere along the way, she made choices that transformed her into someone else, someone capable of looking into my grieving eyes and lying with perfect conviction, someone capable of stealing my future while pretending to protect it. The truth is, I don't know which hurts more, the money she stole or the trust she shattered. The financial theft was devastating, but it's the betrayal that cuts deepest. She didn't just steal from me. She counted on my love for her as camouflage. She weaponized our history, our shared childhood, our mother's dying words. She gambled that I would never question her because I loved her too much. She was almost right. I still have that photograph, the one of us as young women with our arms around each other. I keep it on my dresser, but not for the reason you might think. It's not there to remind me of better times or to make me sad for what we've lost. It's there as a lesson, a warning I look at every single day. It reminds me that betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people who know exactly where your soft spots are because you trusted them enough to show your vulnerabilities. It comes wearing a familiar face, speaking in a familiar voice, armed with decades of shared history. My colleagues at the library became my real family in these last years. Sarah, who brings me soup when I have a cold. Marcus, who helps me with my computer problems. Elena, who invites me to her family's celebrations and never treats me like an outsider. They're not connected to me by blood, but they've shown me more genuine care than the person who shared my mother's womb. People often ask if I regret pursuing the lawsuit. Was it worth it? They say. All that stress, all that conflict for money you can't even fully recover? I understand what they're really asking. Wouldn't it have been easier to just let it go? To keep the peace? To preserve the illusion of family unity? To avoid the ugliness of public confrontation? But here's what I've learned in my 74 years, what it took me far too long to understand. Truth matters more than comfort. Justice matters more than avoiding conflict. And self-respect matters infinitely more than maintaining a relationship with someone who has none for you. If I had let it go, I would have spent the rest of my life knowing that Linda stole from me and got away with it. I would have had to smile at family gatherings, hug her at holidays, pretend that everything was fine while that knowledge rotted inside me. I would have taught my nephew, her son, that family means you can betray people and face no consequences. I would have dishonored my parents' memory by allowing their final wishes to be perverted without protest. It was worth it. Every difficult moment, every painful revelation, every fractured relationship. Because now I can look at myself in the mirror and know that I stood up for myself, even when it cost me, even when it was hard, even when people told me I was wrong to do so. The money I recovered helps, yes. But what helps more is knowing that I didn't let myself be a victim twice. Once when she stole from me, and again by staying silent about it to keep the peace. I think about my mother sometimes, about her final request that Linda and I look after each other. It breaks my heart that Linda violated that promise so completely. But I've come to understand that looking after each other doesn't mean enabling each other's worst behaviors. It doesn't mean accepting betrayal in the name of family harmony. Real love, real family, isn't about blood relation or shared DNA. It's about respect, integrity, honesty. It's about people who show up for you without ulterior motives, who tell you the truth even when it's uncomfortable, who would never dream of taking advantage of your trust. By that measure, Linda hasn't been my sister in a very long time. Maybe she never was the person I thought she was. Maybe I was in love with an idealized version of her, a childhood fantasy that bore little resemblance to the reality. That realization is perhaps the saddest part of all. I didn't just lose a sister. I lost the illusion that I'd ever had one, but I gained something too. I gained a clearer vision of the world and the people in it. I gained the knowledge that I'm stronger than I thought, capable of fighting for myself even after 70 years of being taught that nice women don't make waves. I gained a chosen family of friends who've proven their loyalty without sharing a drop of my blood. And I gained a story. This story, that I can share with others. Not as a warning to distrust everyone, but as a reminder that trust must be earned and maintained, not granted automatically based on family ties. That loving someone doesn't mean closing your eyes to their capacity for harm. That sometimes the people who know you best are positioned to hurt you worst. I see young people sometimes in this library where I spent so much of my life, and I want to tell them, be careful with your trust. Give it slowly, cautiously, and watch how people handle it. Actions matter more than words. Consistency matters more than promises. And blood relation guarantees nothing except shared genetics. But I also want to tell them, don't let betrayal make you bitter. Don't let one person's cruelty convince you that everyone is cruel. Find your people, your real people, and hold on to them. They're out there, and they won't always be the ones you expect. My Michael is still with me, thank God. We're both old now, facing down the years with aches and pains and the inevitable decline of our bodies. But we're facing it together, still doing crossword puzzles on Sunday mornings, still splitting the last piece of pie, still choosing each other every day. The $83,000 I recovered sits in our bank account, carefully managed. It won't make us rich, but it gives us breathing room. We can afford Michael's medications without choosing between pills and groceries. We can splurge occasionally on a nice dinner. We don't have to panic when something breaks. But the real treasure isn't in that bank account. It's in the clarity I've gained, painful as it was to acquire. It's in knowing who I am, someone who refuses to be a doormat, who demands honesty, who won't sacrifice her dignity for the sake of a false peace. Sometimes I imagine what I would say to Linda if we ever spoke again. I've rehearsed it in my head 1,000 times. But the truth is, there's nothing left to say. She made her choices. She stole from me, lied to me, and when caught, she tried to justify it by calling me stupid for trusting her. What do you say to someone like that? What words could possibly bridge that chasm? None. The answer is none. So I sit here in my library corner, in the autumn of my life, surrounded by books and the quiet rustle of pages turning. The young people who work here now sometimes ask me about my life, what I've learned, what wisdom I might share. They expect platitudes about kindness and forgiveness, about family always being there for you. Instead, I tell them this: the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one with yourself. And sometimes, honoring that relationship means walking away from people you thought you'd never leave. Sometimes it means standing up and fighting, even when everyone tells you to sit down and shut up. Sometimes it means accepting that the people who should love you most are capable of hurting you worst. I tell them that DNA doesn't guarantee loyalty, that shared history doesn't excuse betrayal, that family is a verb, not a noun. It's something you do, not something you simply are. And I tell them that it's possible to survive betrayal, to rebuild, to find new sources of love and support. That 74 years old isn't too late to learn the difference between true family and false family. That strength can be found in unexpected places, often in our 8th decade of life when we thought we knew everything already. The photograph still sits on my dresser. That young woman with her arm around her sister, smiling at the camera, believing in forever. She had no idea what was coming, She couldn't have imagined that the person she loved most, outside of her parents and husband, would one day look her in the eye and call her stupid for that love. I look at her sometimes, that naive younger me, and I feel such tenderness for her. She was wrong about so many things, but she wasn't wrong to love, to trust, to believe in the goodness of people. She was just wrong about which people deserved those gifts. If I could go back and warn her, would I? Would I tell 23-year-old Patricia to guard her heart, to get everything in writing, to never trust anyone completely? Number. Because that kind of suspicion would have poisoned her life in different ways. She would have missed out on the joy of trust, the beauty of believing in someone, the warmth of sisterly love, even if it turned out to be an illusion. The lesson isn't to never trust. It's to pay attention when that trust is violated, and to have the courage to act on what you discover, no matter how painful, no matter how long it's been. 20 years I waited, unknowing. 2 years I fought to reclaim what was mine. And now, in these final years of my life, I have something more valuable than the money Linda stole. I have my self-respect. I have the knowledge that when I discovered the truth, I didn't look away. I didn't make excuses. I didn't prioritize false peace over real justice. That's worth more than all the money in the world. The library is closing soon. The autumn light is fading, and I should head home to Michael and our small apartment with its carefully budgeted comforts. Tomorrow I'll come back here, to these shelves and stories, to this life I've built from the wreckage of betrayal, and I'll be okay. More than okay. Because I've learned that you can survive the unthinkable. You can be betrayed by the person you'd have died for and still find reasons to smile. You can lose your illusions and gain wisdom. You can have your heart broken and discover it's stronger than you ever knew. Linda got away with most of the money. She's still living in comfort, still posting photos of her travels on social media, still pretending to be a good person. The family members who sided with her still see her as the victim in all this. The poor woman whose sister dragged her through the courts over ancient history. Let them think what they want. I know the truth. More importantly, Linda knows the truth. She has to live with what she did, with the knowledge that she destroyed our relationship for money, that she violated our mother's dying wish, that she looked her grieving sister in the eye and stole her future. I don't have to carry that weight. She does. And that, in the end, is its own form of justice. As I gather my things to leave, I touch the photograph one last time. Goodbye, I whisper to those two smiling young women. Goodbye to the illusion, the fantasy, the beautiful lie of perfect sisterhood. And hello to the harder, clearer, more honest life I've built in its place.